The day of the ribbon-cutting ceremony arrived, and the air was filled with a mix of excitement and nervous energy. Alex had invited everyone, friends, neighbors, members of the HOA, and even reporters who had been covering the story since it began. For weeks leading up to the event, he'd worked tirelessly to make sure everything was perfect. The cabin stood proudly on the riverbank, its wooden beams glowing in the morning sun, surrounded by lush greenery and flowers that seemed to blend seamlessly with nature. A small sign near the entrance read, ***, welcome home." * as guests trickled in, some carrying picnic baskets or folding chairs. Alex greeted them warmly. He shook hands, exchanged hugs, and answered questions patiently. Many of the attendees were curious about how things had turned out so well after such a heated conflict. One elderly man approached him, leaning on a cane as he spoke. "I gotta admit, son, I thought you were just another outsider trying to take advantage of us," he said, his voice gruff but kind. "But seeing this place now, well, maybe we misjudged you." Alex smiled, feeling a lump rise in his throat. "Thank you," he replied simply. "That means a lot." The ceremony itself was simple but heartfelt. Rachel, the lawyer who had guided him through the legal battle, gave a short speech praising Alex's determination and willingness to compromise. Then came the moment everyone had been waiting for, the official cutting of the ribbon. As Alex held the oversized scissors, he paused briefly, looking out at the crowd. His eyes landed on the HOA president, who stood quietly near the back, arms crossed but expression unreadable. Next to her was the man with the old photograph, who gave Alex an encouraging nod. With a deep breath, Alex cut the ribbon. Cheers erupted and applause echoed across the water. Children ran around laughing, while adults chatted animatedly, many marveling at how peaceful the scene felt compared to the chaos of recent months. Someone handed Alex a microphone, and though public speaking wasn't his strong suit, he stepped forward, ready to share what this moment meant to him. "I never imagined when I started building this cabin that it would turn into such a big deal," he began, chuckling nervously. "At first, all I wanted was a quiet place to call my own, a spot where I could escape the noise of life and reconnect with nature. But along the way, I learned something important. This river doesn't belong to me any more than it belongs to anyone else here. What makes it special isn't ownership, it's the memories people create beside it, the stories they tell, and the connections they forge." He paused, letting his words sink in before continuing. "So today, I want to thank each of you not just for coming, but for teaching me that sometimes the hardest battles lead to the greatest friendships. To celebrate, I've opened up a little section downstream for everyone to enjoy. Bring your kids, your kayaks, your fishing rods, whatever brings you joy. Because if there's one thing I've learned, it's that sharing something beautiful makes it even better." His speech ended with another round of applause, and soon the party was in full swing. Neighbors mingled freely, sharing food and laughter. Some explored the cabin, marveling at its craftsmanship, while others wandered down to the newly created access point, dipping their toes in the cool water. Even the HOA president softened slightly, accepting a glass of lemonade from Alex with a curt nod. Though she didn't say much, her presence alone spoke volumes. Later that evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Alex found himself sitting alone on the cabin's porch. The festivities had wound down, and most guests had headed home, leaving behind only the gentle sounds of crickets chirping and water lapping against the shore. It was quiet now, exactly how he'd always imagined it would be. But instead of feeling isolated, Alex felt connected to the land, to the river, and to the community that had once opposed him. He thought about the journey that had brought him here, the sleepless nights, the frustrating meetings, the moments of doubt. And yet, despite all the challenges, he wouldn't change a thing. Those struggles had shaped not only his cabin, but also his understanding of what it meant to truly belong. The following weeks passed quickly. The cabin became Alex's sanctuary, a place where he could unwind after long days of work. On weekends, he noticed families visiting the public access point, their laughter drifting through the trees. Occasionally, someone would stop by to thank him personally, sharing stories of how much the river meant to them. Each interaction reminded Alex why he'd fought so hard to keep going. One afternoon, as he sat on the porch sketching ideas for future projects, he heard footsteps approaching. Looking up, he saw the man with the old photograph walking toward him, holding 2 cups of coffee. "Mind if I join you?" the man asked, offering one of the cups. "Of course not," Alex replied, gesturing to the chair beside him. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, sipping their drinks and watching the river flow lazily past. After a few minutes, the man spoke. "You know, I used to bring my dad here when I was a kid," he said, his gaze fixed on the water. "We'd spend hours fishing, talking about life. When this whole mess started, I worried those days were gone forever. But seeing this place now, it feels like a piece of that has come back." Alex nodded, touched by the sentiment. "That's exactly what I hoped for," he said softly. "This river holds so many memories for me, for you, for everyone. I just wanted to make sure those memories could keep happening." The man smiled, raising his cup in a silent toast. "Well, you did good, kid. Real good." As the seasons changed and the leaves turned golden, Alex continued living out his dream. The cabin became more than just a retreat. It became a symbol of resilience and unity. Visitors often remarked on how harmonious the area felt, as if the river itself had forgiven the discord of the past. And perhaps it had, because rivers, like people, have a way of moving forward, no matter what obstacles lie in their path. For Alex, the journey was far from over. He still had plans for the property. A garden, a workshop, maybe even a guest house someday. But none of that mattered as much as the lessons he'd learned along the way. Building a cabin had taught him how to build bridges between people, between ideas, and between dreams. And in doing so, he discovered that sometimes the greatest victories aren't about winning. They're about finding common ground and creating something that lasts. Years later, when Alex looked back on his life, he knew he'd remember this chapter above all others. Not because it had been easy, but because it had been real. It had been messy, imperfect, and human, and in the end, that was what made it beautiful. In the small, quiet town of Willow Creek, life moved at a pace that felt almost forgotten in today's fast-paced world. Nestled between rolling hills and thick forests, this little community was the kind of place where everyone knew each other, or at least thought they did. It was here that a carpenter named Alex lived, someone who had spent most of his life building things for others, but never really for himself. Alex wasn't your typical dreamer. He was practical, down to earth, and always kept his nose to the grindstone. But deep inside, he carried a dream of having a cabin by the water, a cozy retreat where he could escape the noise of daily life. For years, this idea stayed tucked away in the back of his mind because, well, dreams like that usually stay as just dreams when you're busy paying bills and keeping food on the table. But one rainy afternoon, everything changed. While cleaning out his late grandfather's attic, Alex stumbled upon an old wooden box filled with papers yellowed by time. Among them was a document that made his heart skip a beat. It was his grandfather's will, and buried within its pages was something extraordinary. Proof that their family owned not just a patch of land near Willow Lake, but also the entire stretch of river flowing into it. At first, Alex couldn't believe what he was reading. How could anyone own a whole river? He double-checked the documents, cross-referenced them with maps, and even consulted a lawyer friend to make sure he wasn't misunderstanding anything. Turns out his grandfather had bought the riverbed rights decades ago as part of a larger estate deal. Back then, owning rivers or parts of them wasn't unheard of, though it was rare. Over time, this detail got lost in history, and no one, not even the local authorities or neighbors, seemed to remember it. The more Alex thought about it, the more excited he became. This was his chance to finally build that cabin he'd always dreamed of. And not just any cabin, a place right on the edge of the river, surrounded by nature, where he could watch the sun rise over the water every morning. The idea lit a fire in him, and before long, he started making plans. He hired a small team of builders, guys he trusted from years of working together. They were thrilled when Alex explained the project. "Man, I've been waiting my whole life to build something like this," one of them said, grinning ear to ear. Together, they filed all the necessary permits, ensuring everything was above board. When the approvals came through without a hitch, Alex felt a sense of relief wash over him. Finally, after so many years of dreaming, the moment had arrived. Construction began on a crisp spring morning. The air smelled of fresh pine, and birds chirped cheerfully as the crew got to work. Alex stood there, watching the foundation take shape, feeling a mix of pride and disbelief. Was this really happening? Was he finally going to have his own slice of paradise? But while Alex was busy turning his dream into reality, trouble was brewing nearby. Willow Lake Estates, the upscale neighborhood bordering the lake, was home to some very particular people. These weren't just any residents, they belonged to a homeowners association, HOA, known for its strict rules and zero tolerance for anything out of the ordinary. To them, the river was sacred, a shared resource meant for everyone's enjoyment. So when they noticed construction activity along the riverbank, whispers began spreading like wildfire. At first, it was subtle. A few curious glances from passing joggers. Then came the questions. Who was building there? Did they have permission? Why hadn't anyone informed the HOA? As days turned into weeks, those questions turned into complaints. Some residents claimed they saw trucks dumping materials too close to the water, potentially harming the ecosystem. Others griped about how the construction noise disrupted their peaceful mornings. It didn't take long for the HOA president, a woman with a reputation for being tough as nails, to step in. She called an emergency meeting, her voice sharp and authoritative as she addressed the crowd. "This is unacceptable," she declared, slamming her hand on the table for emphasis. "Someone is trying to take over our river, and we can't let that happen." Her words struck a chord with the group. Emotions ran high as they discussed what to do next. Letters were drafted, demanding Alex stop construction immediately. But Alex, confident in his legal standing, ignored them. After all, he had done nothing wrong. Or so he thought. Unbeknownst to him, the HOA wasn't about to back down. In fact, they were gearing up for a fight, one that would soon escalate far beyond what Alex ever imagined. Little did he know, his simple dream of a riverside cabin was about to become the center of a storm that would rock the entire community. The tension between Alex and the HOA began simmering like a pot left on the stove too long. At first, it was just whispers, neighbors gossiping over coffee or during their evening walks by the lake. "Did you see what's happening down by the river?" one would say. "Looks like someone's trying to build something big." Another would chime in, shaking their head. "It's going to ruin everything. What about the ducks? The fish? The peace and quiet we all love?" These murmurs reached the ears of the HOA president, a woman known for her no-nonsense attitude and knack for stirring people into action. She wasted no time calling an emergency meeting at the community center, a modest brick building that always smelled faintly of pine cleaner and old carpet. By the time Alex heard about the gathering, it was already underway. Inside, the room buzzed with energy. Residents sat shoulder to shoulder, some clutching notebooks, others leaning forward, with furrowed brows. A few held cups of coffee, steam curling lazily into the air. The president stood at the front, tapping a pointer against a map pinned to an easel. Her voice carried authority as she explained the situation. This so-called development, she said, jabbing the map for emphasis, is nothing short of a disaster waiting to happen. This river belongs to us, to our community. It's not just water, it's part of who we are. And now, some outsider thinks they can waltz in and claim it as their own. The crowd erupted into murmurs of agreement. One man raised his hand, hesitantly. But isn't this Alex guy following the rules? I mean, he must have permits, right? His question hung awkwardly in the air, met with glares from several neighbors. He might have permits, the president shot back, but does he have respect? Does he understand how important this river is to us? We've lived here for years, decades even, and suddenly this person shows up thinking they can change everything. Her words struck a nerve. People nodded vigorously, their faces flushed with indignation. Someone near the back muttered, "If we don't stop him now, next thing you know, there'll be condos lining the whole riverbank." By the end of the meeting, the group had decided on a plan. Send Alex a strongly worded letter demanding he halt construction immediately. They drafted it together, each sentence more forceful than the last. When the letter arrived in Alex's mailbox a few days later, he read it with growing frustration. "Cease all activities on the riverbank," it commanded. "Your unauthorized development poses a threat to the natural environment and violates the principles of shared use upheld by Willow Lake Estates." Alex sighed, crumpling the paper in his hand. Unauthorized principles of shared use? He couldn't believe what he was reading. He had followed every rule, jumped through every hoop, and yet here they were, accusing him of being some kind of villain. Still, he tried to stay calm. Maybe if he explained things clearly, they'd come around. He wrote a polite response, attaching copies of his permits and the documents proving his ownership of the riverbed. "I appreciate your concerns," he wrote, "but I assure you this project is fully legal and will not harm the area. In fact, I'm taking extra steps to ensure the environment remains protected." When the HOA received his reply, they weren't swayed. If anything, they grew angrier. How dare he dismiss their feelings? To them, his fancy papers didn't matter. He was still an outsider encroaching on their turf. The president called another meeting, this time vowing to take more drastic measures. "We've been reasonable," she told the group, pacing back and forth like a general rallying troops. "We've warned him. We've given him a chance to do the right thing. But clearly, he doesn't care about us or our community. So now, it's time to involve the authorities." And just like that, the battle escalated. The very next day, sheriff deputies showed up at Alex's construction site. They parked their cars along the dirt road leading to the riverbank, their flashing lights casting long shadows across the trees. Workers paused mid-task, exchanging nervous glances as two officers approached Alex. "Sir," one of them said, holding up a clipboard, "we received a report about unauthorized construction here. Can you explain what's going on?" Alex felt a surge of disbelief and anger. Unauthorized? Again? He took a deep breath, forcing himself to remain composed. "Officers, I assure you, this project is completely legal. I have all the necessary permits, and I even own the land beneath the river. Here, let me show you." He handed over the stack of documents, watching as the deputies flipped through them. One officer scratched his head, looking genuinely confused. "This seems legit," he admitted, "but we still need to investigate further. Until then, I'm afraid we'll have to shut things down temporarily." Temporarily. The word echoed in Alex Hang-ji. The shutdown hit Alex like a punch to the gut. Watching the deputies tape off his construction site with bright yellow caution tape felt surreal, almost like something out of a movie. His dream, the one he'd been chasing for years, was suddenly on hold because of accusations he couldn't fully wrap his head around. How could owning your own land and following every rule lead to this? It didn't make sense, but Alex wasn't the type to sit back and let life knock him down without a fight. He knew he needed help, someone who understood legal jargon better than he did. After asking around, he found a lawyer named Rachel, a sharp but approachable woman known in town for handling tricky property disputes. When Alex showed up at her office, she listened intently as he explained everything, from the dusty old documents in his grandfather's attic to the HOA's aggressive response. Rachel leaned back in her chair, tapping her pen against her desk thoughtfully. "This is unusual," she said finally, "but not impossible to resolve. You've got solid proof of ownership, and that's a strong foundation. The challenge will be convincing the HOA and maybe even the court that you're not the bad guy here." With Rachel by his side, Alex prepared for what promised to be a long and messy battle. Meanwhile, the HOA wasn't slowing down either. In fact, they doubled down, filing a lawsuit against him. Their argument was simple. Alex's cabin would ruin the natural beauty of the area and disrupt the community's way of life. They claimed it violated their covenants and threatened the shared enjoyment of the river. Word of the lawsuit spread quickly through Willow Creek. Locals had mixed reactions. Some sided with the HOA, believing Alex was selfishly claiming something that should belong to everyone. Others thought the HOA was overreacting, especially since Alex hadn't broken any laws. The controversy became the talk of the town, with debates spilling into coffee shops, grocery store aisles, and even school pickup lines. Local news outlets caught wind of the story and jumped on it. Reporters showed up at Alex's makeshift office, tiny trailer parked near the construction site, and peppered him with questions. Cameras rolled as Alex stood in front of the taped-off area, looking both frustrated and determined. "I'm not trying to take anything away from anyone," he told them, his voice steady despite the chaos around him. "This is my family's land. My granddad worked hard for this, and I'm just trying to honor that legacy, but I also respect the community. That's why I went through all the proper channels before starting this project." His words resonated with some viewers, painting him as an underdog fighting against bureaucracy. Others weren't so convinced. Social media exploded with comments, memes, and heated arguments. One post read, "Why should one person get to control access to the river?" Another countered, "If he owns it, he has every right to build whatever he wants." As public opinion swayed back and forth, the first court hearing arrived. Alex sat nervously in the courtroom, dressed in his best button-up shirt, while Rachel laid out their case. She presented maps, deeds, and historical records proving Alex's ownership of the riverbed. The judge listened carefully, nodding occasionally as Rachel spoke. Then it was the HOA's turn. Their lawyer argued passionately, bringing in residents to testify about how much the river meant to them. An elderly woman tearfully described teaching her grandchildren to fish there. A young father talked about how peaceful morning kayaking trips were for his family. Each story tugged at the heartstrings of everyone in the room, including Alex. He couldn't deny that these people genuinely cared about the river. It was clear in their voices and expressions. But caring about something didn't give them ownership of it. When the judge finally spoke, her tone was measured but firm. Mr. Carter has provided compelling evidence of his legal rights to this property, she said. However, given the emotional significance of this issue to the community, I believe mediation may be the best path forward. Both parties must come together and try to find common ground. Mediation. The word hung heavy in the air as Alex left the courthouse. On one hand, it was a relief he hadn't lost outright. On the other hand, sitting across the table from the HOA again sounded exhausting. Still, he agreed to give it a shot, knowing it might be the only way to move forward without dragging this fight out for months or even years. The mediation sessions began in a neutral conference room downtown. Alex walked in feeling cautious, but hopeful. Across the table sat members of the HOA, their faces tense and guarded. The mediator, a calm man with glasses perched on the edge of his nose, opened the meeting by reminding everyone of the goal: finding a solution that respected both Alex's rights and the community's concerns. At first, progress was slow. Every suggestion Alex made, like limiting noise during certain hours or planting native trees to blend the cabin into the landscape, was met with skepticism. The HOA insisted he abandon the project entirely, which Alex flatly refused to do. Tempers flared more than once, and there were moments when it seemed like the whole thing would fall apart. But then, something unexpected happened. During a particularly heated exchange, one of the HOA members, a quiet man who hadn't said much until now, spoke up. He pulled out an old photograph from his wallet, showing it to the group. "This is my dad," he said softly. "Fishing. Right where Alex wants to build his cabin. Back in the day, we used to see signs along that stretch warning trespassers about private property. I remember thinking it was strange, but no one ever talked about it." His admission shifted the mood in the room. For the first time, cracks appeared in the HOA's united front. Some members started questioning whether they'd overlooked important details in their rush to oppose Alex. Others remained stubborn, accusing the man of betraying the group. The tension between them grew palpable. Alex watched silently, realizing this internal conflict might be his best chance to break the deadlock. If the HOA couldn't agree among themselves, maybe they'd be forced to reconsider their stance. And if they did, perhaps there was still hope for finding a compromise that worked for everyone, including him. By the end of the session, nothing had been resolved yet, but the dynamics had changed. What started as a black and white battle was beginning to reveal shades of gray. Alex left the room feeling cautiously optimistic. Maybe, just maybe, there was a way to build not just a cabin but bridges too. The cracks within the HOA began to widen after that explosive mediation session. What had started as a united front against Alex was now splintering into factions, each with its own perspective on how to handle the situation. Some members clung tightly to their original stance, convinced that Alex's cabin would ruin the river for everyone. Others, however, were starting to question whether they'd acted too hastily. The man who had shown the old photograph of his father fishing by the river became a lightning rod for this growing divide. At the next HOA meeting, tensions boiled over. The president, determined to keep control, opened the discussion with her usual fiery rhetoric. "We can't let our guard down now," she insisted, pacing back and forth like a drill sergeant. "This isn't just about one person. It's about protecting what we all hold dear. If we give in, where does it end?" But before she could continue, the man with the photograph stood up, his voice shaking but firm. "I've lived here longer than most of you," he said, holding up the faded picture. "And I remember hearing stories about how that stretch of river used to have signs warning people not to trespass. We might not have thought much of it back then, but maybe those signs were there for a reason." His words hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. A few members shifted uncomfortably in their seats, while others exchanged uneasy glances. One woman raised her hand hesitantly. "He's right," she admitted. "I've seen those old maps too. Maybe we should look into this more carefully before we accuse Alex of wrongdoing." The room erupted into chaos. Voices rose as neighbors argued with neighbors, some defending the president's hardline approach, others siding with the man challenging it. It was clear the HOA was no longer speaking with one voice, and Alex, though absent from the meeting, was at the center of it all. Meanwhile, Alex was doing everything he could to keep moving forward. With Rachel's guidance, he prepared a detailed proposal outlining how he planned to minimize the impact of his cabin on the surrounding environment. He included plans for using sustainable materials, installing solar panels, and creating buffer zones filled with native plants. He even suggested building a small public access point downstream, allowing residents to enjoy the river without interfering with his property. "It's not just about winning this fight," Rachel told him during one of their strategy sessions. "It's about showing the community that you're willing to meet them halfway. Sometimes, compromise is the only way to turn enemies into allies." Alex nodded, though he couldn't help feeling a little frustrated. Why should he have to bend over backward when he hadn't done anything wrong? Still, he knew Rachel was right. If he wanted to finish his dream project and avoid years of legal battles, he needed to find a way to win the HOA's trust. When the next mediation session rolled around, Alex arrived armed with his proposal. This time, the atmosphere felt different. The mediator opened the meeting by acknowledging the progress made since their last session, however small it might seem. Then, turning to Alex, he invited him to present his ideas. Alex took a deep breath and stood up, spreading out a set of blueprints on the table. "I understand why people are concerned," he began, his tone calm but sincere. "This river means a lot to everyone here, and I respect that. But I also believe it's possible to build something beautiful without taking anything away from the community." He walked the group through his plans, explaining each feature in detail. When he mentioned the public access point, a few members visibly relaxed. One woman even leaned forward, nodding slowly. "That's actually a good idea," she said. "If people can still use the river, maybe it wouldn't feel like we're losing something." Not everyone was convinced, though. The president shot Alex a skeptical look. "How do we know you'll follow through on these promises?" she demanded. "Words are cheap." Rachel stepped in smoothly. "We're prepared to put everything in writing," she replied. "Legal agreements, inspections, whatever it takes to ensure accountability." Alex isn't asking for special treatment. He's offering a solution that benefits everyone. The debate dragged on for hours, with emotions running high. At one point, it seemed like the session might collapse entirely. But then, something remarkable happened. The man with the photograph spoke again, this time addressing the president directly. "Look, I get it. You're trying to protect the community. But if we keep digging our heels in, we're going to end up looking like the bad guys. Alex has bent over backward to make this work. Isn't it time we gave him a chance?" His words struck a nerve. Slowly, reluctantly, the president nodded. "Fine," she said, her voice tight with frustration. "Let's see what happens. But if this goes south, don't say I didn't warn you." With that reluctant agreement, the mediation ended not with a bang, but with a cautious step toward resolution. Over the following weeks, Alex worked closely with the HOA to finalize the details of his proposal. Lawyers drafted contracts, engineers reviewed designs, and inspectors visited the site to ensure compliance with environmental standards. It wasn't easy. There were still moments of tension and doubt, but for the first time, it felt like real progress was being made. As construction resumed, the mood in Willow Creek began to shift. Neighbors who had once viewed Alex as an outsider started seeing him in a new light. Some even stopped by the site to chat, curious about the project and impressed by his commitment to preserving the area's natural beauty. One afternoon, a young boy shyly approached Alex while he was hammering nails into a wooden beam. "Are you really letting us use the river too?" the boy asked, clutching a fishing rod in his hands. Alex smiled, crouching down to meet the child's eye level. "Absolutely," he said. "You'll always be welcome here." The boy beamed, running off to tell his parents the good news. Watching him go, Alex felt a flicker of hope. Maybe this fight hadn't been just about building a cabin. After all, maybe it had been about proving that two sides could come together even when it seemed impossible. By the time the cabin took shape, standing proudly on the riverbank, it represented more than just Alex's dream. It symbolized compromise, understanding, and the power of finding common ground. And though the journey had been far from easy, Alex knew it had been worth every moment.